There aren't many series as synonymous with gaming as Super Mario. Mario is so big that it can try its hand at any genre out there to at least a degree of success. But then there are those games that go one step further. You have Mario parties, Mario RPGs, and the most recognizable of them all, Mario Kart. Since 1995, Mario Kart has offered players the opportunity to race through a variety of different locations, all to be experienced with a racer of their choosing. Over the years, new racers have joined and been welcomed into the Mario Kart family, but what about those that were abandoned? Every character has a story. Stories that decide where a character stands in this series, with each character's placement resulting from a specific reason. However, there is one character whose reasoning for why that neglect was warranted has remained a mystery for over a decade. As time passes, that story, along with the character's reputation, become buried, while the time to act slowly fades away. It's finally time to uncover the truth.
Show me the honey!
Hey, listen, I just wanted to thank you for giving me your time. In this situation, the best place to start would be where you believe it all began.
Super Mario Galaxy and its sequel, Super Mario Galaxy 2, are comprised of many different, well, galaxies. These galaxies contain their own bite-sized worlds, and among them lies the Honey Hive Galaxy. This nature-based galaxy is filled with trees, flowers, and, of course, honey. This honey is occasionally collected by this galaxy's inhabitants, the honeybees. However, these aren't just ordinary honeybees. In reality, they're subjects. Subjects to the subject of our case, Honey Queen. Now, while being the ruler of anything might lead to a misuse in power, Honey Queen is actually quite the kind ruler, offering her assistance to those who need it. If they scratch her back, she'll scratch theirs. Overall though, Honey Queen plays quite the small role in the overall story of Super Mario Galaxy. And while in Super Mario Galaxy 2, she also appears as the ruler of the Honey Hop Galaxy, that appearance is still minor. And in general, Super Mario Galaxy 2 is more so seen as an alternate version to the original Super Mario Galaxy. However, more appearances are only going to do more to staple her into this Mario universe. To push that idea even further, in the original Super Mario Galaxy, Honey Queen's first appearance is very early in the game. You can't assume that every player is going to beat the games they play. So if you have a character, no matter how big or small, appear at the beginning of the game, it's more likely that a player is going to see them and remember them. So in terms of recognizable minor characters in Super Mario Galaxy, Honey Queen's definitely up there. As time passed, Rosalina would also start to become more recognized as a Mario main cast character. Having someone to represent the Galaxy series for Mario spin-off games are very important. So if Mario's biggest spin-off series needs someone from Super Mario Galaxy, well, there's only one queen for the job. No, right, how could I forget? Honey Queen at this point was still going by her previous name of Queen Bee. She later changed this in order to prepare herself for her new life as a racer, to celebrate this re-debut for her fans, and, well, things don't always go as you plan. Suffice it to say, this was not the outcome that she was expecting. And with Mario Kart 7 releasing only 1 year after Super Mario Galaxy 2, what happened here? How can public opinion switch to one that is filled with such anger? To be fair, Honey Queen is not the first character to be disliked by the Mario Kart community. So, what makes her so unique? You see, every single Mario Kart racer who is disliked can be put into a box for why they're disliked. Sometimes it's a quantity issue. The Koopalings aren't individually disliked, but because you need to have all 7 of them, it could make the roster feel bloated for a lot of people, similar to the babies or metal characters. Continuing on with the babies and the metal variants, we also have racers like Tanuki Mario and Cat Peach. You have all of these different racers who are sharing so many similarities to the point where some of them are even the same exact character, just in different variants, all sharing separate spots on the roster. When you get to Honey Queen though, those lines of where that dislike forms from start to blur. She doesn't share any similarities with other characters in her roster. Like, yeah, she's royalty like Peach or Daisy, but other characters share similar archetypes as well. Plus, she's a bumblebee. Is it something akin to the dislike for Wiggler? Maybe the animation was a little off-putting for some people? It couldn't be that either. She looks perfectly normal in the cart. Yeah, she's much smaller than her initial appearance in Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, but characters like Bowser and Donkey Kong have been resized for Mario Kart. Also, Honey Queen isn't as established as those characters. In the vast Mario universe, she's pretty obscure. But that word, obscurity. It's not just a throwaway line. Obscure characters, or characters who are more unknown or unimportant, are a staple to Mario Kart. Because most of the time, Mario Kart is only focusing on the Mario Kart series, you'll have this large roster that's initially filled up by all the series mainstays, but also leaving room for these more obscure and creative choices to make the cut. Characters like King Boo, Donkey Kong Jr., Rob made the cut, and he's not even part of the Mario series. Honey Queen absolutely belongs in this category. In fact, one of the most popular Mario Kart characters would be considered an obscure character. While Funky Kong's popularity has certainly grown with time, especially with his inclusion as a playable character in the Switch port of Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, this was certainly not the case in 2008 with his debut in Mario Kart Wii. In general, though, Funky Kong doesn't usually play a major role in the Donkey Kong series, which becomes even smaller on the grand scale of the Mario series. Plus, it's not like Mario Kart adds much of, if any, lore to its characters, so picking a racer honestly just comes down to what's initially appealing. So what exactly makes Funky Kong a more appealing choice to most players when Honey Queen is the complete opposite? This wasn't a question that I could answer on my own. So I made a couple phone calls, took a couple trips, and asked the people what they believed. Just purely based on aesthetics, which of these two characters is just more appealing?
Funky Kong.
The guy with the polka dot headdress,
the bandana,
right?
yeah.
Funky Kong.
The bee.
I'm gonna have to go with Funky Kong.
The bee.
Funky Kong.
I gotta go with Funky Kong, obviously. I like his shades. I gotta go with Funky Kong.
Definitely him. He's got a cool style.
Little dude had a point. I needed to understand why people believed what they did. What about him makes him so cool, would you say? Why not Honey Queen?
Because he's wearing jorts.
I like the color of his bandana with the white spots.
I just think he looks muscular, looks in charge.
Muscular.
I would say the bandana.
He's a winner. She's giving diva eyes, and he looks like my stepfather, and I've got daddy issues, so.
Why do you like the bee?
It's colorful. He makes me feel happy.
Makes you happy, okay. However, I recognize that only asking one species about two other species would put a ceiling on what I can research. I needed to branch out and expand my questions to other animals out there, without of course showing bias to species who were the same as the subjects. Through this, I was able to get much more of a variety of opinions. Well, at least from those who understood the assignment. And with that, along with some further online research, I was finally able to obtain all the answers that I was looking for. And it turns out that a majority of people preferred Funky Kong. There definitely were some in favor of Honey Queen, but it wasn't comparable. I had to question why this was the way that it was. What made Funky Kong so much more appealing? The reasoning I got for most of this can, to put it under an umbrella term, be that Funky Kong was cool. Why did coolness matter so much? I kept asking myself this question until it finally clicked. They're in Mario Kart. Think about what Mario Kart is. It's a high-octane, fast-paced, chaotic, item-filled, crash-filled race. It's loud, expressive, and in your face. When a character like Funky Kong comes along and shares this philosophy with his design, it's the perfect match. So when the complete antithesis in Honey Queen shows up, whose reputation isn't as established as other characters with similar personalities, the appeal becomes much harder to obtain. Honey Queen's personality just doesn't fit. So for what reason would you pick her? Unless you just preferred her. I mean, it is just an opinion. And if this case was based on an opinion, well, we wouldn't be here today now, would we?
It's a game you've enjoyed for years. But now, it's a tricked out version. You haven't driven before.
Mario Kart 7 is one of the lesser spoken about Mario Kart games, which is odd because it's one of the more ambitious ones. Driving underwater, soaring through the sky, and doing so in a kart customized completely to the player's imagination.
But you see, that ambition would ultimately cause the game's lack of recognition.
Now, before I go any further, I want to make it clear that this is not meant to be a criticism on what Mario Kart 7 does have to offer. In fact, when the game released, it garnered a lot of praise from critics and fans alike. Along with the main three features that we previously discussed, Mario Kart 7 actually had other additions under its belt, such as first-person driving and one-lap, three-section courses. Instead of focusing on one main addition to the game, Mario Kart 7 instead chose to focus its efforts into refining the Mario Kart formula by adding little tweaks across the board to upgrade the flow of races and add new options. However, this does introduce the issue of not having that one defining feature to look back on and remember.
So if a game's identity is being split up between different ideas, does that game really have an identity at all?
So if the karting aspect in Mario Kart isn't hooking something in the player's mind, they're naturally gonna think about the other half of that title. What does the Mario franchise have to offer this time around?
All the tracks, the cards, they're all important. Nothing holds a candle to a game's roster.
Mario Kart 7 introduced 5 new racers. Unfortunately, not all of those racers feel all that new. Take Shy Guy, for example. He was playable in Mario Kart DS previously, but only during download play. While this was absolutely his first time as a fully playable racer, he's still technically raced before. Up next we have Lakitu, who is absolutely debuting as a racer this time, but he's also been the referee for the series, so it doesn't really feel like his addition is as new as other characters. And then there's Metal Mario, who technically is a different version of Mario, but it's still Mario. You're not only going to associate him with another character in the roster, but the face of the franchise.
So, while most of the newcomers in this game don't really feel all that new, that only leaves us with 2 others, Wiggler and Honey Queen. I previously mentioned that silly characters in these games could definitely work, and that's because this game is mainly focused on Mario characters. But when you focus on a specific series, you still need to have that mix of a familiar main cast to go along with those silly characters.
Which, for Mario Kart, means a combination of not only those obscure picks, but also mainstays. So why don't we take a look at the rest of Mario Kart 7's racers? There's actually a popular theory on why each racer was selected. In the first 2 rows, we have every racer returning from the very first Mario Kart game, Super Mario Kart, with Donkey Kong Jr., of course, being replaced by Donkey Kong. Following them in the 3rd row, we have 1 character from each preceding Mario Kart game, with the game they're representing being the one they were a new racer in. Starting them off, we have Wario, who represents the 2nd and 3rd Mario Kart game, Mario Kart 64 and Mario Kart Super Circuit. Since Mario Kart Super Circuit didn't include any new racers, Wario would have to represent this game as well. Moving forward to the 4th Mario Kart, we have Princess Daisy representing Mario Kart Double Dash. Now, the fifth Mario Kart DS, is where this gets a little weird, because there's no one in this row who actually represents that game. However, if we dip into the newcomers, Shy Guy was technically playable in that game. Of course, just not as a fully fledged racer. If this pokes a hole in the theory for you, I completely understand, but for the sake of this, let's continue to go along with Shy Guy as the Mario Kart DS representative. And finally, for the sixth Mario Kart Wii, we have Rosalina. Of course, the Mii is here as well, but the Mii is kind of its own entity usually. Add in 4 entirely new racers to at least be able to comprise a final row, and you have Mario Kart 7's final roster. With that being said, it feels like someone's missing here. Every Mario spin-off game back in 2011 and even today have a set amount of characters that are expected to be in every title. Besides the princesses, the main villain, the sidekicks, the plumbers are expected to always be there, especially in a series as big as Mario Kart.
Now, this doesn't mean that every main character has to be in every game. In fact, they haven't been.
For example, Donkey Kong and Toad just weren't playable for a bunch of Mario Party games, and in the case of Mario Strikers Battle League, Princess Daisy wasn't playable until DLC. This is all to say that it's not the strangest occurrence for an important character to not be playable. If the theory on why each racer was selected is to be believed, then Double Dash just needed one representative and Princess Daisy just beat out Waluigi for the spot, and it wouldn't be the last time. But even following this theory, that's a pretty big character to leave out.
But with the decision to not include a main character in a certain game, a consequence comes along with it.
Especially when you include their partner. And of course, Wario is more popular and even has his own series, 2 in fact. People are always gonna remember Wario's other half. By removing Waluigi from Mario Kart 7, you're making players look at the new racers as a replacement for him. And out of all of the racers, Honey Queen plays the biggest role in the games that she's featured in.
So to include Honey Queen while simultaneously not including Waluigi comes across like Honey Queen's star power is enough to take Waluigi out. Of course, this absolutely isn't the case, and I don't think anybody believes that.
But it is easy to initially think that way when one character is here and another one isn't.
But all of this wouldn't be an issue if Mario Kart 7 wasn't called Mario Kart 7.
Now, it's only natural for a sequel to be compared to what came before it. In fact, it's almost instinctual to expect a sequel to improve on what came before it. But we know that's not always the case, and we temper our expectations when we can.
But that certainly becomes an issue when games start numbering their titles.
If a game comes with a snappy title like Double Dash, or is named after the console it's on like 64 or Wii, many people will of course know that future games are a sequel, but by giving them titles like these, you're communicating as best as you can that these games are merely different versions that could still stand on an equal playing field. But when you introduce numbers into the equation, well, people know how to count. And when you show them a higher number, they're going to expect a higher quality.
But then you realize that the game that this series chose to introduce numbering to was on a console that was much less powerful than before.
Now, this is not a knock on handheld gaming. In fact, this argument can still be made if you believe that Mario Kart 7 is a better game than Mario Kart Wii. The fact of the matter is that if both games were pushed to its limits on their respective console, Mario Kart Wii, or in this case Mario Kart 6, is on a console that allows its concepts and its content to be pushed further than Mario Kart 7's. Because of this, you notice Mario Kart 7's lack of content in comparison to Mario Kart Wii. Even though kart customization was introduced, the entire option of riding on bikes was completely removed. The entirety of Versus mode was removed. And when you finally get to race in other modes, the amount of racers on the track is smaller, and the amount of characters you can choose from is smaller. This has actually been the case for most handheld Mario Kart games that are transitioning from home console Mario Kart games.
And that's completely expected with the game being on a weaker system. But I just can't stress enough that the 7 being in that title is just asking for comparisons.
And it just does not win this fight. And even though Mario Kart 7 introduced all these new mechanics and concepts, it almost feels like all of the content that was taken out counteracts it. Hindsight has not been kind to Mario Kart 7. With Mario Kart 8 being released with the power of a home console behind it, Mario Kart 7 now sits between 2 home console Mario Karts, with both the sequel and the prequel offering more to the player.
So, when you look back at Mario Kart 7, what is there to think about?
The content isn't there. The characters aren't there. The identity isn't there. What is there is a bumblebee. Super Mario Kart started the series. Mario Kart 64 was the first game in 3D. Mario Kart Super Circuit was the first handheld Mario Kart. Mario Kart Double Dash had 2 racers in 1 kart. Mario Kart DS was the first Mario Kart that could be played online. Mario Kart Wii was the first Mario Kart that could be played with motion controls. Mario Kart 8 had anti-gravity. Mario Kart 7 can't decide.
Because of Mario Kart 7's lack of identity, it in itself becomes an obscure title.
Unfortunately though, there aren't enough main series staples to balance this out.
That obscurity becomes seen negatively by the fans because of that.
But then why is this game the cause of all the troubles that Honey Queen has faced? And where does she stand now? Honey Queen has become a victim of circumstance and unfortunately has stayed in this position. Honey Queen has remained absent in the Mario Kart series since her debut over 10 years ago. She missed out on the original release of Mario Kart 8, Mario Kart 8's DLC, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's Booster Course Pass. Speaking of rosters, our final point comes from the other mainline Mario Kart game. The 2019 series debut on iOS and Android, Mario Kart Tour. Due to being bound to smaller devices, Mario Kart Tour has much more simplistic mechanics when it comes to racing. Because of this, a lot of the game's charm comes from the vast amount of gliders, karts, and racers you can obtain. Taking every racer into account, the roster size reaches over 250. Even though a large portion of this number is made up of different outfits for existing racers, it still stands that all the unique characters combine to create the largest selection of Mario characters in a Mario Kart game. So it would be easy to assume that if you combine Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's final roster with Mario Kart Tour's final roster, the current generation of players would be able to race as every existing mainline Mario Kart character. While for the most part that is true, there's an exception for 3 specific members of the Mario Kart alumni. The first of which is Rob, who is a cool character, but not a Mario character, so it makes sense as to why he wasn't included. Moving forward to an odder omission, we have Koopa Paratroopa. While being so similar to Koopa Troopa, it seems like Koopa Paratroopa would naturally fit in. And with those similarities being so strong, it may have seemed like a more efficient use of time to just create costumes for the Koopa Troopa instead of including a whole new racer. And finally, we have... who else? Honey Queen. For Honey Queen to not face the same issues as Rob or Koopa Paratroopa, her exclusion becomes a lot more questionable. It can be seen as an admission that she was a poor choice for Mario Kart 7. Some can even go as far as to say that she is now suffering the same fate that she was once guilty of causing for Waluigi. Even though the truth behind this situation shows that this guilt has been misplaced, how can Honey Queen refute it if she can't return to the series to prove it?
Because of her lack of representation in the Mario Kart series, the only identification people have of her is in Mario Kart 7.
A game that is defined by its obscurity in the Mario Kart series. Due to its own lack of identity, that aura of obscurity needs a vessel to attach itself to. A symbol that people can point to represent this aura. Who better to pick than an obscure game's own obscure pick? A character who has been denied redemption by trapping it in this one entry. Having her only source of identification in this series to be by inheriting that game's aura of uncomfort and unfamiliarity, leaving it to define her.
And the longer she stays away, the longer those unfamiliar feelings, those angry, uncomfortable feelings become familiar, become comfortable.
While it's likely for Honey Queen to return to the wheel one day, the reception she'll have is uncertain. In the meantime, we'll just have to wait for the day that this can be put back on a cart.